Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Well, check out Deal to Heal Tees. With our inspirational tees, you're sure to find something that will inspire you. Just go to dealtohealtees.myshopify.com. That's Deal to Heal Tees. Get some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That's Deal to Heal Tees at dealtohealtees.myshopify.com. Hey guys, this is Earnest James, host of the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, and I got a question to ask you. Could you buy me a cheeseburger? Better yet, could you buy me a value meal? Yes? Well, guess what? I don't need a value meal. However, for the cost of a value meal, you can support this podcast to keep us on the air. Just go to Patreon/Deal to Heal podcast and choose any one of the 3 tiers that's available. And if you just want to make a one-time donation, go to Cash App and make a donation to $EJames, the number 418. Make a one-time donation to the Cash App, or again, go to Patreon to support this podcast and keep us on the air. Thanks in advance. Be blessed. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, to heal, and to fulfill. Deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our Facebook page, and to our podcast on Spotify. Definitely on our YouTube, we're trying to get those numbers up. We know that you guys listen because we see the numbers, but you oftentimes forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything. So again, I'm asking you guys to subscribe, and also I'm gonna tell you guys how you can win $100 from the podcast, but you got to stay until the end to get that information. But our next segment that I just started and I'm want to do, just to let you guys know, is our product of the week. So our product of the week that we have is our ebook. You guys probably can't see it that good. It's an ebook, and it's called Forgiving Me, the 4 Steps to Self-Forgiveness. It is available at ebooksbyejames.com, which is my website for the ebook that I have available. This ebook deals with us being able to forgive ourselves, because oftentimes we make decisions in the moment, and when we get a little farther down the line in time, we realize that those the results of those decisions didn't necessarily work out the way that we expected them to. And therefore, sometimes we hold grudges against ourselves for those decisions because we should have known better. You know, we shouldn't have did that. We should have did something else. But hindsight is 20/20, right? And so in this ebook, I talk about being able to forgive yourself by looking at the 4 steps that I give you to be able to forgive yourself for past mistakes, and also use those same 4 tools as a template for making future decisions that you won't have any regret for. So again, that's Forgiving Me ebook that is available at ebooksbyejames.com. So make sure you guys are checking that out. So that is our product for the week. All right. So again, thank you guys for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Mr. Kimball. How are you doing?
I'm good, Ernest. Thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. First of all, let me say thank you for being here because you could have been doing anything else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and I definitely appreciate it. So we're going to jump right into it. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to my listeners and tell us who you are and what it is that you do.
So my name's Kimball Lewis, and I'm the CEO of a company called Empowering Parents, and we're essentially a website, empoweringparents.com, and we are the home of something called the Total Transformation Program, which is a parenting program for parents who have kids that are defiant, out of control. Parents come to us, they say they're at their wits' end, and so our entire purpose is we evangelize this program, and the program was put together by a gentleman named James Lehman, and it was one of the hottest parenting programs in the early to late 2000s. Unfortunately, James Lehman passed away uh, before his time, but what we're doing is we're carrying on his legacy, and he had this just fantastic approach for dealing with parents that have kids that are very defiant, unruly, obnoxious, dealing with lots of really tough issues. And so we're keeping his message alive, we're keeping his program alive, and making it available and accessible to parents through empoweringparents.com.
All right, all right. So how was it that you came to be, the person in the forefront now? So how was it that you came to be either first of all just even involved with the movement, and then that what kind of led to you being the spokesperson, so to speak now?
Yeah. So I'd like to say that I had everything planned out in my life. I knew exactly where things were going, but doesn't work out that way. God
Right.
God has various plans, and I spent the first few years of my career working in Washington D.C. for some think tanks doing research on a lot of child welfare issues, foster care issues, that type of stuff. So I was in that world of social policy research and policy research. But my life took sort of a technical turn, and I ended up in healthcare and doing healthcare analytics and healthcare technology type stuff for about 15 years, doing startups, that kind of thing. And about 2015 or so, this opportunity came available where an old acquaintance of mine reached out to me, and the the marketing and business person behind James Lehman and the Total Transformation Program. And James Lehman had passed away recently, and this was like 2015 or so, and most of the programs that point had been like books and DVDs and that kind of stuff. That's not how people get content now, as you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
They get it through podcasts, they get it through other stuff. So my acquaintance who had been running the company, he was a sort of a media guy and knew how to like buy and sell media and put this stuff out there with call centers and stuff using traditional radio and television. That's not where the world is today. People don't listen to the radio or even television the way they used to.
Right.
So he wanted James. We had incredible following. We had 500,000 parents have used this program, and needed a way to get it out there. And he was not a technology guy. So, and I had spent 20 years in technology, and I had this background from all of my social policy research from years ago. And he asked me to come in and take over the company and convert it so that you can consume this content and get everything through our website at empoweringparents.com. And it's all online now. It's like a learning management system. You can log in and follow through the programs. And we actually have online coaching where you can, a lot of times when you're dealing with kids that have behavior problems, it's hard to talk to your relatives about it and your friends about it. There's always like a judgmental thing going on. And it's not always the parents, I gotta say it's not always. It's usually not the parents' fault. It's the child who has the issue. And you just get a tough kid. Some kids are hard, and it's not the parents' fault. And and we know it because we have a lot of parents that have two kids that were pretty easy, and one of them's just hard. That's not their fault. So anyway, so we we have a place for them to come now where they can learn the techniques of dealing with specifically with these kids that are really difficult, and they log on and they can talk to one of our coaches. So that's what I was getting at. So it's hard to talk to your family and other folks about this kind of stuff. If you're lucky, you have someone you can without being judgmental or them not thinking that you're a horrible parent. That's why your kid's acting out.
Right.
So we provide coaching services as well, and you can talk to one of our coaches. You set up phone calls. So we have this whole integrated with a program where you go through this learning program. You can also talk to one of our coaches and talk about what you're struggling with. How do we might talk about this later, but one of the things we do is how do you put together a menu of effective consequences? You want to be thoughtful about consequences, because kids, when they act out and do things they're not supposed to be doing, there needs to be a consequence. But
Right.
not all consequences are created equal. So we work with them on what is the appropriate consequence that's going to work for your child over time, and avoid the ones which are not effective. There's a lot of stuff that parents do that's just not effective, and you want to avoid doing those things as well. So we're a place for all that. And we have a website. We have hundreds of free articles, and I have a writing background also. So I did a lot of the writing for the articles as well. And we get about 500,000 visitors a month to our website. So we have tremendous website traffic. People read our articles. But ultimately what we want them to do is to invest a couple of months' time to completing this program, the Total Transformation Program, which will give them the basis for dealing with these behavior issues. And they'll look at it differently. They'll look at their parenting differently, and they'll look at their child differently in a sort of a more effective way. So that's why we exist. That's why I'm here. And it's been a great journey. It's been almost 7 years now. So.
Okay. So I do kind of remember hearing about the Total Transformation. That definitely rings a bell.
Oh, you remember it? He was all over the air.
Yeah,
he was all over the airwaves in all 50 states. Yeah, on the radio.
Yeah, so I definitely remember hearing it. I'm in the transition phase. So by the time that this airs, my daughter, who is my youngest child, and my only biological child, will have just turned 20. So I'm kind of out of the teenage phase now, but which is brings its own problems. You know what I mean? Because it's one thing for you have teenagers, and then it's another thing when they become young adults, and now it's just it never stops. The parenting never stops. It just goes through phases. So now it's on to the next phase. But I wanted to have you on for two reasons, right? Because even though from my viewpoint, your work aims more at children, teenagers, maybe. What I found that some of the, at least to me, some of the same behavioral problems that our children have, our adults have because they didn't fix them when they were children. So you get those same behavior problems, same ideas of acting out, so to speak, in our young adults and sometimes our older adults, because it was never addressed when they were younger. And so I want to have this conversation, of course, to address it, how we address our children moving forward, but also just to be able to point out some of the things that I believe will still help, our young adults also, because I think those the remedies will still help once they're put into place, once it's been addressed. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, for those two reasons, to address, correcting the behaviors in our children, but also, correcting some of the behaviors in our young adults and older adults too.
I'm really glad. I'm glad you brought that up, Ernest, because traditionally our sweet spot was adolescents and teenagers. You see that you can tell who's going to be the tough kid probably when they're 2 or 3. Like, you just kind of know. But when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, those ages, they might be trouble a little bit, but they don't really have too many responsibilities in life. So it's like their trouble's kind of more annoying than anything else. But when you hit teenage years, the kids get, their hormones are going crazy. They actually get worse. And they have responsibilities they need to meet through school and some other stuff. And that's when parents come to us, because that's when it becomes intolerable. But more and more and more, especially over the last 5 years or so, of the parents coming to our website have what we call young adults living at home. We call them adult children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're 20, 21, 22. They're still at home, and they're not home just because they're trying to save a little bit of money or something. They're home because they can't support themselves. And they're doing the same stuff they were doing as teenagers. And they claim they're adults. They say, I'm an adult. You can't tell me what to do. Oh, by the way, pay for my cell phone bill, pay for all my food.
Yeah.
But that's like that's such a huge part of our business now are these young adults. We actually have to draw the line at a certain age, and we actually draw the line at 25.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a little bit arbitrary, but there becomes a point at which you're not really the parent, because if your child's 30, they really are an adult, and we tell if they're living at home still, we're kind of like, well, you kind of have a roommate problem.
Right. Yeah. And that's why, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but under age 25, there's still this parent-child relationship where the parent's the authority in the household. That's a big part of what we do, which is that it's the parent's household. They're the authority. They get to make the rules. Maybe you don't always agree with what the rules are or whatever. And until the child has the skills and ability to move out and make it on their own, like they have to abide by the rules of the house. And especially as the kids get older into their 20s, we recommend the parents treat their kids as if they're a guest. Mm-hmm. What would you tolerate with a guest in your house? And there's a point at which a guest becomes not a good guest, and you're like, they got to go. So anyway, but we can talk about some of that too. But I'm just glad you brought that up, because these issues that haven't been resolved flow into the early 20s, and the kids are still at home, and they're still causing a lot of problems for the parents.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I am kind of in that spot now, right? So my daughter is my only biological child, and she's, like I said, by the time that this airs, she'll be just to make 20, and she's the youngest of my 5 children. I have 4 stepsons, who are still under 24, but in those early 20s, and with me, dealing with them, and also just other people that I know that's in the same realm now, where our children are making that transition, into, young adults. And, one of the things that you said, with, I'm adult now, and, how they think, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah. And I always say, if you have to announce it, then you're not there yet. Yes. You know what I mean? If you have to remind people that you're an adult, then it's probably because you're not acting like an adult. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so one of my things I always say, the 2 things that I teach this to my children, and also to my mentees in my male mentoring group, is the 2 things that makes an adult is respect and responsibility. When you can master those 2 things, then you've officially made that transition, and the hard part that we're finding, which is why, like I said, I wanted to have you on, because it affects our teenagers and our young adults, is that responsibility piece, to be able to be responsible for the things that you're supposed to be responsible for, and making that transition. And so that's kind of, like I said, part of why I wanted you to be on, because I believe that they go hand in hand. And like you even just admitted yourself that, it is transitioning into those, early 20s, young adult years, especially if we don't catch it early enough, and don't kind of address some of the behaviors early enough. And so let's go back a little bit, just dealing with, the kids as they're, like you said, early. When they're early, you can kind of tell which ones is going to be tough, right? And I remember, and I often talk about my brother on the podcast. My brother is literally 1 year and 11 days younger than me, right? So my birthday is May 1st. His birthday is May 11th. He was born 1 year after me. And we are like complete opposites, right? And so it was 9 of us, 9 kids with my mom and dad. And he's the middle child. I'm the oldest boy, but he's the middle child. But we're just the opposite. Right. And so, his thing was, he was just that child that always looked for the bad. You know what I mean? And he even talks about it. He was like, hey, that's just what I wanted to do. Like, out of 9 kids, we got that one that just like, he's going this way. You know what I mean? Everybody else is going the right way, but he's just going to go that way. And,
same parents, right? Same parents. Yeah. It's not parents, like same household, same everything. And that kid's different.
Yeah. And he was just that kid that's like, I'm going to go my own way. And so I brought that up because, like you said, when you have a child that's kind of, different, and you mentioned about sometimes feeling like, okay, is there something wrong with my parenting? When not necessarily, because I mean, if you got if everybody else is going the right way, then it may just be that kid, and so you can't necessarily take it personal as a parenting issue when it maybe just be a personality issue because that kid just wants to go his own way.
That what you're describing is so critical to the total transformation program that we have. And one of the things that we say is don't blame yourself for your child's behavior, because a lot of parents come to us with a lot of guilt about where their child is, like they've done something wrong. And we explain to them, look, there's more effective or less effective things you could be doing, but your child is the one who did those behaviors. And don't blame yourself for it. The guilt's not helpful. It's not effective. What you want to do is you want to keep the accountability on your child. Your child's the one responsible for their behavior, not you. Mm-hmm. And when you take, and a couple things happen when you take blame for their behavior. One is you become racked with guilt, and you won't give them consequences because you think they're acting out because of something you did or didn't do as a parent. So why would you punish them even further for something that you were doing lacking as a parent? So we don't believe that. We say, keep the responsibility on the child. It's the child's behavior, not your behavior. And then what happens? And then another thing that happens is these kids are manipulative. Mm-hmm. The founder of our program, James Lehman, spent several years in prison. He was a bad kid. He was a bad kid who turned things around, went to Fordham University in New York, got his master's degree at Boston University, became a social worker and counselor in group homes for 30 years. But he started out in prison. I mean, he started out bad. And he knows, like, kids, if you're acting guilty and holding yourself responsible and blaming yourself for your kid's behavior, a lot of these kids recognize that and they'll use it against you. They'll manipulate you. And then third of all, this is even worse than a manipulation, is some kids come to believe, honestly, in their heart of hearts, that the reason that they can't behave properly is because their parents failed them. And now they have a complete scapegoat. Anytime they do something bad, they believe it's not their fault. In fact, they believe that they're not capable of learning how to live a responsible and respectful life because they didn't have the parent that they ought to have had. And we just say, no, there's only one person in the entire world who can change this, and it's the child. The child, so the child has to be held accountable. You can't blame yourself for it. We counsel parents, look, there are effective things you can do and things to avoid, but don't take responsibility for it. When your child is in the middle of their kitchen looking at you, 15-year-old girl look at you in the eye and says, F you, mom, screaming at you. That child knows that they're not supposed to do that. They had a choice to make at that moment, and they chose not to. And if you turn around and blame yourself and said, oh, the only reason she's saying that to me is because I just was not a good parent, then that doesn't help the situation at all. So, we're very adamant about that the responsibility and what were the terms you said, responsibility and respect, that those two things, you can coach your child to that, but the child has to be the one that learns to develop those things. So as a parent, you're a teacher and a coach, but you can't play the game for them. They're the only ones that can play that game that can learn how to do that. You can't go to the gym and work out for your child and expect your child's muscles are going to grow. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So we tell parents that and you laugh, but so many parents come to us racked with guilt that they were the problem. The reason that their child is difficult and doing all this is because they're just not a good parent. And it's just not right. It's not effective.
Yeah. And even with that, especially with me dealing with my sons, that was one of the things that I often had to tell them, like, I can tell you what to do. I can teach you what to do, but you're not going to get it until you start doing it, and I talked to them about responsibility, because I'm like, okay, you have things, especially as a man, a young man, eventually you're going to be, somebody's going to be dependent on you. First of all, you're to be dependent on yourself to be able to take care of yourself. But then if you get a girlfriend, if you have children, you start a family, now you have other people that's depending on you also. So you have to be able to be responsible for, your actions, but also responsible for the things that you're, in charge of. But the thing with responsibility, it's not a switch. You can't just turn it on and turn it off. You learn to do it by doing it. That's the only way you're going to get into the habit of becoming a person who can be depended upon, is by being a person who can be depended upon. But you got to start now. You got to start with taking out the garbage every day because that's your job, or whatever the thing is. And so you have to start because that's the only way you're going to get it. You don't just wake up today and say, okay, I guess I'll start being responsible now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess I'll start being accountable for my actions now. Like, no, it's a process that you have to learn, and you only learn it by doing it, And so I'm glad that you brought that up.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I think I found my new James Lehman, Ernest. We should talk after this show because you're preaching, you're preaching exactly what he's teaching, which is that behavior and good behavior and responsibility is a skill. It's learnable. It takes practice. Parents have to realize that also. It takes practice. That if you have a child who's struggling with these things, that they don't have the problem-solving skills to be responsible and respectful, that it's a process to get there. You got to help them through it. And you can't expect that one's consequence and problem solved. It's going to take a while. Especially when they get older, these are deep-seated habits that need to be changed.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's completely learnable. We have so much hope for the parents to come with us because we see so many of these things be turned around and get much better because these kids can learn it. They all can learn it. They all can learn to be responsible and respectful. They just have to be given. They need a little bit of coaching, but the responsibility needs to be put on them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we have now that are, at least to me, and this is speaking from a parent, from my point of view, that I think one of the things that I see is that we're dealing with a generation that is so emotional. You know what I mean? It's like they're so emotional and everything is almost feelings based all the time. So it's like, how do I feel? You know what I mean? And so everything is off how I feel instead of, necessarily, and I would say just dealing with, again, going back to how teaching my sons, even with your emotions, you got facts and you got feelings. And you got to learn how to deal with the facts. You might feel a certain way, but you have to react according to the facts because the facts don't change. Your feelings will change, but the facts don't change. And I think that, a lot of times, even with our behavior with our kids, a lot of times it's how I feel, and I know one of the things that you talk about is learning to, feel your behavior can't go on your fear. I don't know exactly your words. I can't put words in your mouth, but I know it's kind of similar, something like that. So just tell us a little.
You want me to talk about that? I can talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So part of the reason that, every generation says, what about kids these days? But it really has gotten a lot.
Yeah.
It's gotten out of hand a little bit. And you know what? It's for 20, 25 years, and James Lehman talks about this. He was talking about it 20 years ago, and it was not popular. Luckily, he's dead, so no one can cancel him, right? Because he's already God canceled him. God canceled him 10 years ago. So he when you listen to him, he's able to say truth. And he said 20 years ago, he goes, the esteem movement in this country is going to ruin kids. When you start saying the reason you don't behave well is because your self-esteem is low, he goes, that is not the right approach. He says, true. It's possible and likely that kids that have the severe behavior problems also have self-esteem problems, and they might be related. He goes, but never once in the history of the world have I ever seen a child who has acting out behaviors who you treat them by trying to raise their esteem and suddenly they behave better. He goes, it doesn't work that way. He goes, what really works is you teach them how to behave better and their esteem goes up. When they learn how to solve problems, when they learn how to become respectful, their esteem goes up. Kids that don't have any respect at all have low self-esteem, but that's not because, but people got cause and effect backwards. The reason they don't, the reason they have low self-esteem is because they don't know how to treat people respectfully. If they have the skill of treating people respectfully, their esteem will go up. If they have the skill of learning responsibilities, their esteem will go up. So James Lehman famously said that you can't feel your way to better behavior, but you can behave your way to better feelings. And the focus needs to be on the behavior. And he goes, he saw it all the time where you coach a kid through coaching and consequences to learn how to solve their problems more effectively without abusing and hurting other people. And their esteem rises as a result. And when you drive down the highway, it doesn't say speed limit 70, as long as you're feeling good about yourself. If you feel like crap about yourself today and you're angry at someone, you can drive 90, go at it. It does not say that. It's 70, whether you're feeling good or bad or indifferent. And And whether you're feeling good or bad about yourself, it doesn't matter. You should not stand in the middle of your kitchen and say "F you, mom" right into her face. That's not appropriate, no matter what. So the goal is appropriate behavior, no matter how you're feeling, because there's ups and downs in life. And to just write that off as oh, I'm feeling down now, that gives me license to abuse other people in my life, my siblings, my parents, my teachers, all that other stuff. So he said, not 20 years ago, he said nonsense. That's not, this esteem thing is not helpful. What we need to do is teach kids how to behave and how to solve problems and become respectful and responsible in their lives. And that's the key. That's the key to the whole thing. And it's doable. And that's achievable, actually.
Yeah.
Telling a kid who'd learned how to tie his shoe when he was 10 years old, like, oh, great job tying, you learned how to tie your shoe, is not helpful, because A, it's not impressive if a 10-year-old can tie their shoe. A 3-year-old is impressive, but telling some kid who has almost no skills that he's excellent at something is not going to be helpful, right? What you want him to do is learn how to do something that's hard and teach them and show them the process. And when they've learned how to do something that's hard, then they will actually develop real esteem.
Yeah. So. And I think that with esteem, as I feel that you're, feel the same way just from what you just said. Esteem is built on how can I say this? Esteem is built on what you feel yourself that you're capable of achieving, basically, right? And when you don't feel that you can achieve certain things, that's where your self-esteem goes down, because it's like, okay, I can't do this, or I can't, be this, or whatever it is. And so in that area, that's where your esteem begins to go down. But when we are empowered by what we can achieve and what we can do, then that, lifts us up. Yeah. And so again, like you said, when you're focusing on the feelings part of it, that your feelings change from moment to moment. You know what I mean? So if you're trying to build it on that, that's never going to work. I remember talking to a friend of mine and helping her with one of her sons, because for whatever reason, he was just really defiant with her. You know what I mean? But when he would go to his friend's house or, different places, he would come back and the parents would bring him back home. They'd be like, oh, he's so respectful. He's so, but when he got home to her, you know what I mean? He was like a whole nother child. And, and then again, going back to, with the parents feeling some type of way, like they failed their child in some way. I said, begin to talk to her, like, no, that's not you, that's him. Because obviously, if he can behave outside of your house, then he can behave inside your house, but it's just going to take some adjusting, definitely, first of all, with you as a parent before it goes to him, and I used to always say, and I, even especially as adults, I tell women, when I talk to a lot of women, a man is going to do exactly what you allow him to do, right? And that man, or should I say a male, however you want to say it, is going to do exactly what you allow him to do. And it doesn't matter that he may be your son. You know what I mean? He's going to do what you allow him to do. Whatever he feels he can get away with, he's going to get away with it. And once he knows, okay, that mom is going to, allow me, like, push those boundaries, then he's going to push it because he knows he can get away with it. But you as the parent have to build those boundaries and set those lines up, of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for you. And then you have to uphold it, And I know one of the things that you talk about is, setting the consequences. We definitely can get into that, because I think that's part of the reason too. Because one of the problems my friend had was, let's just deal with chores, with telling her kids to do something. And then when they didn't do it, then it was like, you know what, I'll just do it. I said, no, because once they figure that out, they're never going to do it. Yeah. It's like, mom's going to fuss, she's going to yell, but then about 5 minutes later, she's going to go do it. Okay, we'll deal with the yelling. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, no, you can't do that, because once they figure it out that, oh, she's going to go do it, then you've already lost. You've already lost the battle, because they've already won because they figured it out.
Well, so that child had a problem. So we call it, the child has a problem. The problem is the child's not sure how to meet a responsibility. And so that child said, oh, I'm going to try, here's a technique I'm going to use. I'm going to act out and say no and be defiant. And then lo and behold, my mother does it for me. Problem solved. That's why it worked. It actually worked. So they actually solved their problem by acting out. But that's not effective problem solving, and it doesn't work well when you get into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
It might work with your parents. And as life gets more and more complicated, if your go-to way to solve your problems is to act out, you're going to have to act out more and more and more to solve the more and more complex problems you face as you become an adult. But the acting out is a problem-solving skill. And it actually works. That's why they do it. A tantrum will get you a candy bar. And when you get the candy bar from the tantrum, you learn, oh, and in fact, you don't even have to do tantrums anymore. All you have to do is look at your mom in the eye in a certain way, and you give that look like I'm about to explode in this supermarket if you don't give me what I want. And the mother's like, oh crap, okay, quick, here's the candy bar, even before you ask. And they don't even have to get to that point. And now instead of the parent running the household, the child's running the household. So, yeah. And the other thing I want to comment on which is I love that you were talking about your friend whose child's an angel outside the house, but at home is not good. The first thing, if she's in our coaching program, the first thing I'd say to her is you should be thankful. Like, you're lucky. Like, and that's the case most of the time. Most of the parents come to us, that's the issue, is that they have problem with mom and dad at home, but they tend to behave okay in school. Like, they're not getting suspended all the time or whatever. So if it's you they're having the problem with, that's good news, because that is really solvable. A few techniques here and there, you change your approach a little bit. We have such high, we're almost 100% on fixing that problem. The other problem, which we get, thank God it's not as often. It's like maybe 10% of the cases that come to us are the ones where the child is defined at home. They're defined at school. They're defined with the police. They're defined with everyone. That's more difficult to deal with. We work with those parents as well, and there are techniques that work really well, can turn those kids around as well. But if the child's generally behaving outside the home and you're having a problem with them, that's good news. So I would say that's good news for your friend. Pretty much what you said, which is that you just have to figure out how to work that relationship. The child knows how to behave. Right. So that's always a good news story for us. When I hear that, I'm like, oh, that's an easy one. Not easy. I mean, none of this is easy, right?
Right.
But
easier is relative.
Yes, but in the, like, let's say you're going to the dentist, like, that's an easy filling. That's not a root canal.
Right.
So it's not like it's easy. You enjoy, you still have to go through the process. But
yeah,
but that transformation is likely to be total, and it won't be that tough. Some of the other ones are more challenging. James Lehman, the author of the program, was more challenging. He ended up in prison. He ended up with, serious substance abuse problems, and he's lucky he's alive. But he's alive for a reason. And the reason he was alive was he was kept alive because he has, God granted him this mission, which is that he was going to learn how to deal with kids like himself and then teach parents how to do that. So.
Yeah. And so that brings up another thing that you mentioned a little while ago that I want to hit on, which is the consequences of the behaviors, right? And so, like you said, James Lehman ended up, being in prison for some of the consequences for his behaviors, and so, there's always consequences for what we do. But you mentioned earlier about, sometimes the consequences don't equal the offense, sort of. Those are my words, but sometimes it's not equal. And so, we have to make sure that the consequences match, or at least the consequences will lead us in the direction of where we want the child to go, And so one of the things that I believe you talked about is, you can't punish your child into better behavior, I think is the wording that it is. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know, even like I said, me growing up, it was 9 of us, and all of us have different personalities, and like I said, I always talk about my brother because we are like, the good son and the bad son. So we was like total opposites. Yeah. So how my parents, or I just say my mom, and more directly, how she treated us was a little different as we got older. You know what I mean? She was patient with all of us, but probably a little more patient with him than she had to be with me, because she didn't have to be patient with me because I pretty much was, went my way. So the consequences and the things that we put in place have to kind of definitely be tailor-made per child. But again, like you said, and in most cases, in some cases, you can't punish the child into behaving the way that you want them to behave.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that concept.
So with consequences, I'm going to start with what you don't want your consequences to be. You don't want them to be a punishment. You want them to be something to learn. You want to learn from your consequences. And so when I say not a punishment, I'll give an example. Long-term grounding for a week or a month is not effective. It teaches your child something, but it only teaches them one thing. It teaches them how to do time. And you don't want your child to be good at that. You don't want them to gain the skill of being able to do time for a month being grounded. That's not useful. So we tell parents we want our consequences to be short-term, task-oriented, and time limit based. So when I say short-term and task-oriented, let's say you haven't done your chores. The consequence is you lose your electronics. You unplug it, or you take the phone away, you do whatever until the chore's done. And you just hold on to it. And the consequence is over when the child decides that the consequence is over. They finish the chores, and then you hand their phone back. And then the slate's clean at that point. And they do it again, you take it away until they get their chores, and you be consistent. It might take a while. It might take a few tries. But again, they'll start linking it, and they'll learn that when they complete a chore, they get their electronics back. Another one is, let's say you have siblings, one hits the other sibling continually. You take away their electronics, you take away something of importance to them, or they lose some type of privilege until they can go 3 hours without hitting their sister or calling her names. And if they can learn to do it for those 3 hours, and they're being pretty decent, then they get their thing back. And then you do it, then you start all over again. When you have a long-term consequence, you bankrupt your child. You take away everything from them. You have nothing left to take away. There's nothing worse than dealing with a kid who has nothing to lose. If you're ever dealing with someone who has nothing to lose, you're not in a good place to be. You never want to get into a fight with someone who has nothing to lose. You're gonna, right? It's not a good place to be. So you want to get those things back into your child's hands so that you can take it away again. And you want it to be a learning experience, which is they lost something for a little while, but they learned how to gain it back. And so that's and it varies with child, depends on what they like or don't like or whatever, but you want to be thinking short-term, task-oriented, how do I get it back to it? And sometimes it's hard to know exactly what's going to be a good one. So like in the example I like to use where the daughter's in the middle of the kitchen looking mom in the eye and saying, "F you, mom," what do you do? So one of the consequences, it's going to seem silly, but it actually works, is they lose some privilege for, an hour or two for whatever they did, not super long. But in order to get their privilege back, they also have to write a letter to mom. And the letter doesn't say "I'm sorry," because we don't believe it when they say "I'm sorry." And we're not worried about them being sorry. What we want is them not to swear at you. That's what we care about. So what they have to do is write a letter saying, "Dear mom, I know that in this household, one of the rules is we don't swear at our parents. And I broke that rule. And next time I'm feeling frustrated with you, I'm going to do X instead." And then you coach your child as to what they do the next time they're getting frustrated, because frustration is a problem also. Kids have to learn how to deal with frustration. A lot of them deal with it by saying "F you, mom." What they need to learn is a way to calm themselves down before they get to that point. And you can coach them on that. So part of the letter writing in the consequences that they have to sit down and they write the letter. They have to say, first of all, write out clearly they know this is a rule in the household that they have broken, so that that this household has rules. And second of all, here's what I'm going to do next time I'm frustrated. And they're going to roll their eyes, ignore the eye rolling. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to fight every battle. Eye rolling is just, when your child rolls their eyes, you've already won the argument at that point. They're just going along with it. Focus on their behavior. And when they have that letter written, then they get their thing back. And they don't have to like it. They don't have to whatever. You just say, okay, you met the consequence. And the next time they do it, same thing's going to happen. And at some point they're going to get tired of doing the whole thing, and they'll just realize that, they're right. I don't have to explode and cause this big problem. Yeah. So those are some of the examples of having short-term task-oriented consequences that are more effective.
Yeah. And I like that, because one of the things, when I talked about my friend and her son, one of the things that I talked to her about, and even him, was, when he would act out with her, it was his behaviors, and then, when I would talk to him, he'd be like, oh, well, I was mad. I was like, okay, well, then the thing that we got to do is address how you deal with your anger. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And so that's what we're going to address. It's nothing wrong with being angry. It's an emotion. We all have it. It's how we react to that anger, how we process it and act out of it, is what becomes the problem. It's not a problem for you to get angry, but if you get angry, start breaking stuff in the house, and tearing up the house, now we have a problem. And so we have to deal with how you work through your issues. And then that was some of the things that I worked with him on, which, calming yourself down. You know what I'm saying? If you feel yourself getting upset, then you already know before you get to that point, you got to start addressing it within yourself. Okay, let me calm down, or, whatever it is, mechanisms and those things, again, addressing the behavior. And I like what you said, because in the writing of the letter, and even in the way that it's worded, it does several things. Then one, it acknowledges the rule, or whatever it is that you're breaking. It acknowledges that, but then it acknowledges their way of reacting to it, and the way that they're supposed to react to it.
Mm-hmm.
So by acknowledging all three, like, okay, it points out the problem, it points out what you did wrong, but then also points out, how you're going to correct it. And I think that's great. That's a great thing. And it just takes me back. One of the things that you were talking about when you mentioned about the kids having siblings that was fighting. I remember when we were younger, my brother and my sister, who's right over me, they used to get into it all the time. Right. They always arguing and fighting over something. And one of my things that my mom would do, and she did it with all of us, but she did it with them the most, because they would get into it the most. And so she would always say, no matter what, you have to love, your sisters and brothers or whatever. So whenever they got into it, the consequences, they would have to hug and kiss each other for whatever amount of time that she did it. So they would have to sit, if it happened in the kitchen, they have to stand in the middle of the floor of the kitchen and hug each other and kiss each other on the jaw or on the nose, wherever she told them to kiss at. And they would have to stay there and do that,
I love that one. I'm writing that down.
For whatever that time period was, And it's like, it's one of those things, like you're looking at this person that you're so upset at, but it's like, look, the only way we can stop hugging is if both of us kiss. You know what I mean? So it's like, look, just kiss me on my jaw so we can get this done with, But yeah, that's one thing she did, man. She was like, look, you got to love each other. So you're going to stand there and you're going to hug each other and you're going to say, I love you. And you're going to kiss each other on the jaw, for whatever the amount of time, that she gave him. But again, our bond as a family, as especially our siblings, from the things that my mom taught us, even as adults, is much stronger than some of our other friends and family that we know of. And I think it's because of those principles that my mom really preached, and taught to us about how we treat one another. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, because
and it sounds like she was thoughtful and kind of matter of fact about it, which is good, because we always tell parents that if yelling worked, parenting would be easy, right? You just yell at your kid and then problem solved, but it doesn't work that way. You yell at your kid and they yell back, and it just never gets that way. But you just have as best you can, stop the yelling, because it doesn't work. It's not effective. Mm-hmm. But what is effective is that you've got some real consequences, and you just go business-like about it. And look, you got to hug now. You got to hug and kiss now for 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah. And it works. I'm telling you, it
works. So, but that's and going back to the rule thing in the household, that's another thing, that in the households where there's chaos, tell parents, write the basic rules of the household down, put them on the refrigerator. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be 30 pages long. It's just like, there's like 7 or 8 basic rules about no swearing, no hitting, no breaking stuff. You do your schoolwork before, whatever time you do your chores, whatever, just whatever the basic rules are, put them on the refrigerator. So when the child's getting in trouble for something, it doesn't become an argument every time about, like, between you and them personally. It's just like, look, you broke the rules. Those are the rules of the household on the refrigerator. And the example I use is imagine if there were no speed limits, no speed limit signs anywhere.
Right.
And it's up to the police officer who pulls you over. It's up to that, says, yeah, you were speeding. And the person's like, well, I wasn't speeding. Well, yeah, I think you were going too fast. No, but I don't think I was going too fast. There would be an argument every single time get pulled over. It's so much easier. So much easier when you go, look, the speed limit's 70 and you're going 90. That's the end of the story. And if you go, well, I think the speed limit should be 90, that you can say, well, you know what? There's a city council meeting next week.
Right.
Go talk to them about it. And it's same thing with the parenting. We can have a council meeting in 2 days at 5 to 5:30. You can come and we'll argue about whether or not swearing at mom is a good rule or not. Okay. So tomorrow night, we'll meet, we'll sit down, we'll talk that through. You tell me what your ideas are. And you know what? The kids never show up to that meeting because they don't care about that meeting. All they want is the rules not to apply to them.
Right.
So, but having the rules on the refrigerator says, makes that statement, A, that this is a household that has rules in it, and B, it makes the issue between the child and the rules and not between the child and the parent. And that in and of itself solves a lot of conflict. When it feels like every rule is like an arbitrary decision at that moment that the parent's making, that just leads to more conflict. It's so much better to have a set of these are the basic rules of the household. You broke that rule. See, it's in the refrigerator. It was on there yesterday, and the day before you broke that rule. You're getting a consequence now.
Yeah.
And they'll start to digest that after a while. They'll realize that they live in a house that there are some expected responsibilities and some basic rules, and you have some order in your household.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect. You're still gonna have conflict. It's not completely perfect, but it's better than not having any rules.
Right. And I agree with you because that was some of the things that I did, even in my household with raising my kids. Another thing that I learned with not only just, mapping out directly like what the rules are, but go over the rules when there's not conflict. Like when everybody's in a good mood and everything's going good. Hey, let's visit this right quick, because now we can address it when there's no consequence on the line. There's no emotion on the line and nobody's in trouble, but we can go over this to make sure that while all of us are in this acceptable or accepting state, that we can go over this list and say, okay, these are the rules. You know what? I know it. Everybody feel good about it. Okay, cool. So now when something does happen, then it's like, hey, we just went over the rules the other day. You know what I mean? Like, so you're cool with it. Then, so you already knew before we got to this point that, yeah, these are the rules. And now that you're breaking them, And so I think that's a good thing, man, to be able to, set the expectations up front, and I think that's another thing too, that I definitely had to address, again, with my children is what is my expect? This is what I expect from you. I think that's another thing too. If once a child knows what's expected of them, how they're expected to behave or expected to, operate within whatever the parameters are that you're dealing with, it makes it a little easier too. Because it's like, okay, I'm not just sending you out here on a wild goose chase. I'm telling you exactly what I expect from you. The reason why these rules are in place or whatever, and it just makes it a little bit easier because the communication of it is clear across the board, and so so we don't, just kind of, it's like picking your battles. Excuse me. It's like picking your battles because you don't want to have to, address everything. You know what I'm saying? Because there's always going to be something, but you don't want to be fighting every day. You know what I mean? So it's like you gotta pick your battles. Excuse me.
Yeah.
What you're going to deal with and what you're not.
Yeah, and we have a saying where explain yourself once and move on, which is you can have that meeting, you can explain what the rules are, but your child may not agree, they may not like it, they may not be capable at their age of understanding why we have curfew rules or why we do have some rules about meeting the parents before you get to go hang over, spend the night at their house. We didn't know where you're spending time. Like they may not understand that. And that's fine. They don't have to. You can explain it to them, but it's not a bad idea to explain to them. It's not a bad idea to listen to them, but it doesn't have to be a constant back and forth with that kids will put you through in order to wear you down with the goal of not understanding it, but the goal of getting it so the rule doesn't apply to them. So we say, it's one of our more popular articles on our website, which is explain yourself once and move on. And we give parents license. That's what you should do. And the child, you don't have to convince your child that to agree with the rule that you made. They may or may not agree with it. You can take their input, and there's nothing wrong with changing it. As kids get older, your expectation should change. Some rules, curfews. We want our kids to be independent. We would hope that if the child's meeting curfew and doing and acting responsibly, that you extend the curfew. Like that seems natural. You'd want to do that.
Yeah.
So, and we advocate that the goal here is independence, and you don't get there by tightening things down. You get there by letting your kids off the leash more and more and more as much as you can. So.
Yeah. Man, this has been a great conversation, man. I definitely appreciate having you on. I want you to leave us with some words of encouragement, or I don't know, words of encouragement, or just a tip or something that you can leave for our parents, and definitely the information for your website and your program where parents can reach out to work with you. I'll give you a chance to think about that.
Okay.
In the meantime, to my listeners, I told you guys at the beginning of the podcast, I would tell you how you can win $100 from the podcast. And you can win $100 from the podcast by joining our super subscriber contest. So what does that mean? That means you must subscribe to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and our podcast on Spotify. Those three spaces you have to subscribe. And then you text the word WIN, WIN, to the number 866-326-0730 to qualify to win $100 from the podcast. The contest is ongoing and it's random. So, man, that means once you're in. You don't never have to, reapply. And then it also means that at any time, any day, I can pull a name and that person will win $100. Just that simple. So yeah, you can win $100 from the podcast just by doing that. Also, I want you to make sure that you guys definitely go. I know we talked about the product of the week, which was the Forgiving Me, which is the 4 steps to self-forgiveness. Definitely go to the ebooksbyejames.com to check that out. Also check out the other ebooks that we have available that I think it definitely has great resources. We have the Forgiving Me is there. We have a book called Males to Men, which is a male mentoring book for young men who's making a transition from boyhood, should I say, into manhood. And then we also have a book called The Core 4, which is the core 4 values that every daughter should be receiving from her father. And that book is good for daughters and good for fathers because number one is let the daughters know what they should be getting, but also let the father know a couple of things that he should be pouring into his daughter for to help her grow up as a well balanced young woman. So again, check those out. The ebooksbyejames.com and check out our ebooks. Again, Kimball, thank you so very much for being on, for sharing your expertise and your story with us. Again, I can't thank you enough. I definitely enjoyed our conversation, and I'll let you have the last word. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so just one thing, and this is I'm going to follow up on your forgiveness thing. So this is something I tell parents a lot is that, and we counsel, which is that don't take your child's behavior personally. Even when your daughter, I used this example before, even when your daughter's in the middle of the kitchen looking you in the eye and saying, F you, mom, don't take it personally. Look at it as a behavior problem. They don't know how to be respectful yet. You're going to teach them. They don't know how to meet their responsibilities yet. You're going to coach them into doing that when you're in the programs like the Total Transformation Program. So don't take that behavior personally. It's not about you. It's just their behavior. And you will be much more effective as a parent. And when they turn their behavior around, you won't hold any grudges because you'll realize you'll be able to offer them grace and forgiveness because you haven't taken it personally as a personal attack on them. It's just a behavior problem. So that's I always tell parents that don't take it personally, even when they say terrible things to you. No one says anything. Your family says worse things to you than anyone else. Right?
Yeah. I heard someone say your family is your first bullies.
Oh yes,
I say that
absolutely. Very few strangers treat you the way their family does.
So your family going to point out everything that's wrong with you.
Yeah, and if you're looking for help, we're at empoweringparents.com. And, we the first thing I say is just come to our website, subscribe to our newsletter. and then just check out the articles. And then hopefully if you need help, we have our coaching and the Total Transformation Program. It helps so many parents. So, and we have great success rate. And thank you, Ernest, for having me on. This has been terrific.
No problem. I thank you for your expertise. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Like I said, I think it's very important, not only for our, adolescents and our teens, but those, young adults that's just making that transition. I think a lot of them could definitely still use that information also. So again, to my listeners, thank you guys for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And so our mission is to help people to deal, to heal, and to fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Be blessed. Hey guys, I know you're enjoying the podcast. However, don't forget to join our text line at 866-326-0730. That's 866-326-0730 in order to receive text messages with new events and things that is going on and new episodes as they release. All right, see you in a minute. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.